Welcome to episode 14 of The Lowdown Show. I'm Neil Graham. This week I'm talking to Sarah Schilke, a longtime mover and shaker in the U.S. motorcycle business. Sarah's worked at, among others, Schuberth, BMW, and she's now VP at SW-Motech. Sarah is also one of the principals at Women Riders Now. But before we move on, a word from our sponsor. eBay Motors is here for the ride. With some elbow grease, fresh installs, and a whole lot of love, you transformed 100,000 miles and a body full of rust into a drive that's all your own. Brake kits, LED headlights, whatever you need, eBay Motors has it. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, it's guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time, or your money back. Plus, at these prices, you're burning rubber and not cash. Keep your ride alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, and of course, exclusions apply. Shall we take the plunge? How did you develop an interest in motorcycling?
I get asked that question a lot, and I wish I had a great story, but it was kind of on a whim when I was in college one night. Somewhere I came up with this idea. Wouldn't it be cool if I had a motorcycle? And all my friends laughed at me. But then a couple days later, one of the guys stopped by with an ad for a 250 Rebel, classified ad in the newspaper back then. And he was like, you know what you said the other night, if you're serious, this would be a good bike to start out on. And I didn't know anything. I didn't know there were different brands or styles of bikes or anything like that. So I actually ended up calling on it. It was a woman selling it, which probably made me feel comfortable asking all my stupid questions. Thankfully, she steered me in the direction of professional rider training. But I ended up buying that bike. It was my first bike. So that was kind of how I got started.
Now, you were 2021 at that point?
I think it was 23.
23. Now, did anyone in your family ride? Did you come from a riding motorcycling family at all?
No, I did not. And as a matter of fact, my dad for a time was the county coroner. And so we heard a lot of motorcycles are dangerous type things. So when I finally told my family about it, I had really emphasized the safety element and all of the training that I'd done and the gear and everything, so they wouldn't be worried about it.
Okay, we have to back up for a second. So my mother hated motorcycles and was convinced I was going to die. But you had it worse than anyone I've ever heard. Your father was the county coroner.
Yeah.
Wow. So how did he soften over time towards motorcycling?
Yeah. And actually, the conversation was harder with my mom than with him. And I think it was just he had known over the years that I'm pretty conscientious about everything I get involved in, and I walked him through the training, how I got started, and kind of like what safety is about. And so I think, he understands that there are, people who manage the risk and then the crazy people attached to the handlebars. So, it's kind of an education process when you're talking to people who don't ride about motorcycles.
Yeah, perpetually thus. Now, to those of us who know you or follow your career, you've worked seemingly for every Germanic brand sold in America. So take us through your career. How did you get started in the motorcycle business? And I guess your interest as an enthusiast led you there. And then what was your first gig?
So shortly after I started riding, I got involved with the training program here in Oregon, Team Oregon, and I started out as an instructor, but then when I graduated from college, they had an open position on staff. And so I took an administrative job with Team Oregon. And in a nutshell, basically from there, I just kind of always stuck with motorcycle related companies. And I've been recruited around quite a bit. And in high school and college, I studied German, and I lived in Germany a couple times. And so that was a natural piece that kind of fell into the puzzle eventually. But my first, I would say, real big job in the motorcycle industry was I was a Western advertising sales manager for American Motorcyclist magazine, the publication of the American Motorcyclist Association. Um, and then from there, I went to Germany to work with the Heingericke brand. They were introducing the G by Heingericke women's line in the US and Germany, but it was being spearheaded here in the US. So that was kind of my first foray into combining motorcycling and the German work culture. So after Heingericke, let's see, I went to Schubert and helped that company launch or relaunch the brand in the US in 2020. I think that's actually when I met you, Neil, was
That's right. Yeah, back then.
working on the magazine for Schubert helmets. And then I took after a while, I took a position at BMW headquarters, which also just seemed like the perfect trifecta: marketing motorcycles, the German company. And I moved myself cross country for that. And that was just a really incredible experience, of course. And currently I'm with SW-Motech, another German company. I moved back to the West Coast about 5 years ago, mostly because, as you know, at our age, we're starting to want to be closer with our families again and our aging parents. So I'm really excited to be back in my hometown with them. And I had the fortune of helping SW-Motech start their US subsidiary business here in Oregon back in 2020. So now we're about a little over 4 years in, and we continue to grow. And for people who don't know SW-Motech,
Yeah, please do. 'Cause I don't know this stuff that well, so please tell me what they do. Tell our listeners what you guys make.
Of course. So they're a global leader in the manufacture and design of motorcycle luggage. Protective parts were really well known for crash bars and skid plates and things like that. Also ergonomic parts like handlebar risers, aftermarket foot pegs, shift levers, and navigation solutions in terms of like cradles for navigation. And then, of course, lots of different carrier systems for the different kinds of luggage, and everything from Harleys to adventure bikes to sport bikes to everything in between.
So just I mean, in your time in the business, there's been a real shift to sort of ADV style bikes, which is obviously the interest of most of our listeners. But it's kind of curious because now, and when we were younger, it was the standard sort of motorcycle, or a sport bike would have been what we'd have seen most of all.
Mhm.
And then the rise of the ADV bike. And I know you're pretty avid off-road rider, I believe.
Yeah.
I mean, do you have any thoughts of that, of the sort of the rise of the ADV? Because it's, I remember when BMW came out with this GS, everyone thought it was absurd. And then now it's the de facto standard motorcycle, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I've heard a lot of considerations about what's going on with the ADV market. I think it's fun, and people want to ride to an off-road location instead of trucking their bike, and they want to ride there in comfort, which is better than riding a dirt bike on the street. So I think there's some element of that. Also, there's a lot of speculation that people like you and me, who came from sport bike backgrounds, are looking into a more comfortable long distance type of riding comfort and bike. um, and I don't know, it's fun. There's all this training to do with ADV as well, so it's not just about riding on a gravel road to connect a long cross country trip or something like that. Now people are actually able to go and get trained at whatever level they are and increase their skills, and then they're going to want more and more out of their motorcycle. So I think it's just a trend that's catching on like wildfire.
eBay Motors is here for the ride. I've made a career out of getting my ass kicked by women, but let's keep it to motorcycling. I used to race speedway back in the day, and there was a woman, Joanne Edwards, who raced with me, and she was a steel worker and as tough as you would think. Her street bike was a 6-cylinder Honda CBX. I remember her skinny boyfriend holding on for dear life. Anyway, Joanne hit me once as she was passing me and then yelled at me later for getting in her way. Great woman, great rider. My second good story about racing against women was when I joined an all women's road racing class for a one-off. And I qualified fifth or sixth, and a woman, Vanessa, claimed that I shouldn't keep my grid position and that I should start at the back because I wasn't a woman. And of course, I argued vehemently against that and lost. And so I had to start from the back of the grid, and the race started, and I had the red mist, and I kind of bumped into this other woman. She broke her shifter. She'd driven all the way to the East Coast from Colorado. And at the end of the race, I had to do the worst thing imaginable, which is apologizing. And I hate apologizing. But I had to do it. I walked over to her, and she had the longest screwdriver I've ever seen. And I thought, great, she's going to stand up and she's going to stab me with this. So she got up, came over to me, screwdriver in her hand, and she gave me a hug. So it all ended well. With over 122 million parts, you can make sure your number one ride stays running smoothly. Brake kits, LED headlights, roof racks, bumpers, whatever your baby needs, eBay Motors has it. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, it's guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time, or your money back. Plus, at these prices, you're burning rubber and not cash. Keep your ride alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. Now back to my conversation with Sarah Schilke. You're listening to The Lowdown Show, presented by advrider.com and supported by ebaymotors.com. You're mentioning rider training, and that's something that's really changed over the years, because I know that, like, when I started, and I won't even say how many years ago, when I started flat track racing, there were no schools. There were, you bought a bike, you showed up at the track, and you hoped you didn't go through the fence. But now, of course, when you think of all the riding schools, in every imaginable discipline, for every skill level, that's one of the things that's really, I think, transformed motorcycling almost more than anything else. Would you agree with that?
I think probably the two things that have transformed motorcycling are the availability of training at all levels and all disciplines, and the influx of smaller displacement bikes, because that's enabling more people to feel that motorcycling is accessible. So between those two, it's definitely what's helping grow the sport.
And there's an interesting question. You said grow the sport, but I know that, and you can, because you've been in the corporate world for a long time in motorcycling, there's seemingly so much hand wringing about this loss of the next generation, the iPhone generation, kids who seemingly have no interest in motorcycling. I know that's a concern. Can you give us your perspective from working inside BMW and Schuberth? Maybe BMW because they sell motorcycles. Maybe it's more directly a concern. But how serious is the concern that motorcycling is no longer as vibrant as it once was in terms of young adopters?
I think in some parts the jury's still out on that, although I am seeing a big influx of younger riders, new segments, female riders. And I do feel that it's growing, and the younger generations are known for wanting experiences over things. So they might not be buying the biggest, most expensive new motorcycle, because you can have great experiences and hang out with your friends on a used bike, or, a smaller displacement bike, or an all-around bike. So I think that it's going to show in the next 5 to 10 years how that new generation is really responding, because they're only easing in right now. That's what we're seeing. And what better to take pictures of on your iPhone than you and your motorcycle?
It is a very good motorcycles are very Instagram friendly. It's true. Now, in terms of you've always been involved with women in motorcycling, and before we get to some of the things you're currently involved with, including women riders now, and you can tell us what that's about in a moment. But what's it like being a woman, especially in working with primarily German-based companies, but also a woman in really what is a man's industry? I mean, has that changed over the years that you've done it, or how, what has been your perspective on it?
I would say it's evolving. It still is, just like being a woman rider in a overwhelmingly male sport. I feel that women, either in the industry or in the sport, have to kind of prove ourselves a little bit more. The assumption isn't that we ride; it's the question is, do you ride, not what do you ride, I guess. And I think it's kind of similar in the industry. Also, it's like we have to just prove ourselves more because the assumption isn't automatically that we ride and we know about motorcycles and motorcycle business. But I do feel that things are changing. There's more and more women in the industry every day, just like there's more and more women on bikes every day. And I feel that that's changing. There are more outlets also, especially on the riding side, for women to connect with each other and not be the one woman in the group of men. There's plenty of women's organizations now, and it's easier to get in touch with them. So, I mean, it is a thing being a woman in a male dominated industry, but I do see it evolving slightly.
You're listening to The Lowdown Show, presented by advrider.com and supported by ebaymotors.com. So you're involved with something called Women Riders now, and I've seen the name before, and I have absolutely no idea what it is. So Sarah, can you take us through what that organization is and what are your goals?
Absolutely. Womenridersnow.com is basically the premier community / online publication for everything women in motorcycles. So it was started by a woman named Genevieve Schmidt back in 1999. It started out as kind of a Harley publication, and that later evolved into Woman Rider magazine, which was a print publication, a sister publication to Rider magazine that we have here in the States. And in 2006, Genevieve took Woman Rider into the digital world with womenridersnow.com, and then eventually the print version went away. And so about 5 years ago, my business partner, Aaron Sills, the land speed record holder.
I just met her recently at a BMW thing. I didn't. Okay. I didn't realize she was involved with you in this. Okay.
Yeah. So we partnered together and have taken the reins from Genevieve. She still participates and helps us out quite a bit. But so we manage it with our editor, Trisha Zaleski, who you might have met over the years. Who knows? She's
I haven't, no.
Longtime moto journalist, and she worked for a long time at Road Bike Magazine, and she's been with us for quite a long time. So we have a nice small crew, but we do everything from motorcycle reviews. I have a review on the new Transalp coming out soon, and gear reviews, travel. We have a national listing of women's motorcycling organizations and clubs, and we have a national calendar of women's motorcycling events. We do profiles on women riders. So it's basically just, a all-purpose motorcycle magazine for women by women. In the past, it's been heavily cruiser focused because of its beginnings, but as it's evolved, it's gotten more inclusive of. We have got lots of sport bike content. We just did a feature on women in the road racing industry. And we're definitely branching out quite a bit more into dirt and ADV riding as well.
Well, you touched on something that's sort of interesting. And I wrote a piece a while ago, which got a lot of response about seat heights in motorcycling. Because I'm 6 feet with a long inseam, and I think I've only ever sat on one motorcycle that was awkward, and it was like a rally KTM single.
Yeah.
And I stopped on uneven ground, and I had that, with the foot pawing the air, and one of those oh shit moments. And then I thought, well, this for riders, for a lot of women and a lot of men, because the average. And then I looked it up, and so the average height of a man in North America is only 5'9". Which was a little less than I thought. So, but this is something, especially with ADV bikes, seat height is a real issue for a lot of women.
And riders in general.
A lot of riders, and yeah, a lot of riders in general, exactly.
But yes.
But I mean, that's because, you know, I'm a bicyclist. So if you buy a bicycle, you know, you go in and there's 9 frame sizes and everything is totally tailored to you. Now, I talked to a designer about this, a motorcycle designer, and he said that it's not necessary that seats are that high, that it's just this sort of inertia in the industry, mostly male designers,
Yeah.
of course. And so they design bikes that fit them. But it's absurd to me that you're designing a bike, most motorcycles, and I think this is why a lot of women start off on cruisers. It's the seat height issue, isn't it?
It's a lot of that for sure.
Yeah. I mean, how do you find, how tall are you?
5'4", 5'4" and a
4.
half.
Take the half inch. But I mean, how do you find, like, you know, like a 1250 GS or something? I mean, those are huge bikes.
Yeah. The GS is kind of a special bike because it is a big lot of motorcycle there, especially when you've got all the crash bars and the luggage and everything on it too. But fortunately, between the lowered version and they have very low seat option that's also somewhat narrow, it actually is, for such a big bike, it actually gets pretty low and works pretty well. I think especially because of the boxer engine helps it feel really stable and balanced, especially at low speeds or, you know, when you're on a dirt road or something like that. So that's kind of a unicorn of a big bike. Right. But there are, I mean, we had a Tenere here as a showroom bike, and even with lowering links and a low seat, I could barely get it off the center stand. With the Transalp, I just have the low seat on it, and that's good enough. I think I could trim it down a little bit more, but those are always considerations. I know Triumph is making some really low Tigers, which is great. So there are options out there, but yeah, the default always seems to be it's too tall. And it's funny because I've been on a lot of like tour company tours or trainings, and the demand is always like, we need every bike lowered. Even the men will oftentimes want the bikes lowered. And it's just so funny to me when you go and it's like, well, does anyone need a low seat? And it's like pretty much everyone on the tour and the training.
The issue of seat height is something that's really interesting to me. And you talked about it as a rider, 5'4" and a half.
Yes.
But I just got back from a Triumph launch, the Tiger 1200. And, you know, a lot of predominantly men from motorcycle magazines, a lot of from the US who were not that tall, very good riders. I mean, expert riders. And it was the same thing. They were asking for the lower seat. And I mean, when you worked at BMW, and not to throw BMW under the bus, that's not what this is about. But I mean, was there ever discussions about this? Because this seems like one of the most absurd things to me. And it doesn't affect me because of my height. But I mean, you go anywhere where motorcyclists congregate and you see people just incredibly frustrated dealing with high seat heights. I mean, was this ever a conversation within the companies?
Yeah, for sure. I think definitely, and not just at BMW. We always used to laugh that maybe the seat height issue was because Germans are such a tall culture in general. So if they're designing for their average height, it's taller than, like, say, the North or South America, where people are, like you noticed, typically a little bit shorter. And I think, but the good part of that is that there's been a lot of feedback, and they do sell into all these different countries. So as the companies learn about it, they are offering, you know, low suspension models, lots of different seat configurations, and there's, you know, more and more aftermarket lowering links available and things like that. But I mean, again, like you were talking about with the bicycles, and you've got 7 different frame sizes. I mean, motorcycles aren't that adaptable. So it's, you know, trying to make one that will fit everyone is kind of impossible. So you do need to have smaller ones and bigger ones and adjustability.
And because Kawasaki did that, they that really ugly cruiser they made, the parallel twin cruiser. I mean, one of the things do you remember a few years ago, one of the things they touted about in their advertising about that model was that you know, the seat was adjustable, but the pegs and the bars, and it was sort of, you know, can't remember what the model was called. But I wonder if I'd be curious to talk to them and see if that actually made a difference. But I see people are buying, especially a lot of women, because we're talking about women riders. A
Yeah.
lot of women have to buy the bike that suits them,
Yeah, true.
as opposed to the bike that they want,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I also think part of that is salespeople or friends and family steering them in the direction of what they think she should ride. And she might not actually, try the big GS because she'll just assume it's too big, or alternately ride what someone else tells her to ride because they ride it and then that doesn't fit right. So there's a lot of, I feel like women riders often need even more education than the average new male rider because of those types of things.
Yeah, I was at a training thing a few weeks ago here in Canada, and it was interesting. It there were a couple of women there, and they seemed overly affected. No, I mean, actually not overly affected. They seem affected by the sort of the overwhelming maleness of this event. So there's probably 40 riders and probably 5 or 6 women.
Yeah.
And you could really sense the discomfort of having to rise to, the level of the male riders. And there were lots of really bad male riders, so there really wasn't much to rise to, you know, but it still exists, doesn't it? I mean, we can talk about how far women have come in motorcycling, and it's true, and
Mhm.
but still there is a thing that exists for a lot of women, I think. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would agree with that. And there's a funny analogy I've talked about with people a couple times where a lot of us are really nervous about dropping our bike or crashing. And I think a lot of times it's because if a man does it, it's just part of motorcycling. But if we do it, it's because we're female. Like people will look at it that way.
Yeah.
And just that exists, it's still reflective of being a woman in a male dominated sport.
So now that you're back in Portland, I've actually never been to Portland, but I'd love to go. But now that you're back in Portland and you've got lots of great riding around where you are, what sort of riding do you do now?
Oh, I'd like to think that I do it all. I'm still a sport bike gal at heart, so I have my sport bike for fun rides, and we've got lots and lots of great sport bike roads here in Oregon. And I've been a dirt biker for a long time, so I have actually a dual sport bike now, and I get that out in the Tillamook forest fairly often. And then, with this Transalp, I had a BMW before too. I'm trying to link the two and get into the ADV more, which I'm finding is pretty fun. There's this weird sense of empowerment riding over rocks and bumps or catching air on a big bike.
Yeah, and the fact that when you see a dirt road, I mean, I'm a Ducati guy, so I see a dirt road and it's like, oh, I wonder what's down there. I can't go there, but I guess I mean that's the appeal. You can go anywhere, really.
Yeah. And Ducati's got the bikes for it now.
They do, but you can go anywhere until your skills run out,
Yeah, exactly.
and then you're screwed.
Yeah.
But that's forever thus. Now, and back to your company, SW-Motech. Um, what are you guys selling? Like, what are the? I mean, I would think that the products you sell reflect what's selling in the marketplace. So, what moves for you? What are movers? I don't know. What do they say in marketing? What's moving for you? What's
Yeah,
selling?
I mean, the company as a whole is really well known in the ADV segment. So that's our primary segment, and we sell tons and tons of crash bars and skid plates and engine guards, and also carrier systems for either aluminum boxes, or we've got some soft waterproof cases, and we've got plastic lightweight cases. And so all of the carrier systems for that, and basically everything to outfit a bike for ADV riding or ADV touring, those are our best-selling products. Also, tank bags. We just sell so many tank bags with the tank ring, click in, click out system. But then we also have a whole line for cruisers and retro cafe bikes that sells well too with the carriers and that style of luggage. We also have quite a lot for sport bikes, like all kinds of sliders and things lever guards, things like that. But I would say that's a little bit slower moving because, we have such a focus on ADV right now.
And do you make stuff for the smaller displacement bikes as well?
Yeah, we have quite a wide portfolio, and the team in Germany is getting, as soon as new bikes come out, they're getting them in the workshop and outfitting them. It takes us, a little bit longer because of sea freight to get the new products, but they trickle in fairly quickly. We don't have a lot for the really small, skinny bike, dirt bikes, but the larger dirt bikes, adventure bikes, everything else, we've got lots and lots and lots of products.
And I sometimes forget, because I was at the F900 GS launch recently.
Mm-hmm.
And, you look at the base price and you say, okay, well, it's, 13,000. And then the price as tested with the luggage and with the, and BMW and all their, as you well know, all of their, their off-road package and this package and that package. And all of a sudden it's $19,000. So let's cut to the chase. Is your stuff less expensive than OEM stuff in terms of luggage?
I would say it depends on the OEM, but we're definitely competitive. And in a lot of cases, our products are more premium or nicer looking or more adaptable to a particular rider's needs.
So you have to try harder. Because otherwise they'll just purchase the OEM stuff. I guess that's the gist of it, right?
Yeah. I mean, but we have different options. So the OEM, for example, we do actually produce aluminum cases for a number of OEMs. But if a rider decides...
Can you tell us who?
Well, Harley Davidson, with the new adventure bike, we're doing their bags and they're promoting that. So if you have those bags, then we have all the accessories for them too, because they're very similar to the hard cases that we sell. So that's one example, but some people might not want the hard cases that the OEM is offering. So they'll go with a soft case system or maybe a different kind of carrier for a smaller bag, that kind of thing.
The move towards smaller displacement motorcycles. And, we use this term smaller displacement, but it's really not true. Like, when I was a kid, a 500 was a mid-sized bike and a 650 or 750 was a big bike.
Yeah.
And now if you said to someone you were going to take I like that little 500 Honda. I don't even know what it's called.
Just CB 500X?
Yes. Mm-hmm. I thought we had one that was out kitted with bags and kitted out with bags and crash bars. And it's like everything you need. It really is everything you need. And in terms of even off-road, and we did quite a bit of off-road riding with it. And yeah, the suspension, there's no bling factor to a 500 Honda. But because of its lightweight, the fact that the suspension was kind of cheap and the tires weren't really appropriate, well, because it's so light, you more than gain the capability of a bigger bike with the proper equipment, if you know what I mean. And a set of knobbies on that thing would go anywhere. And yet this sort of big bike stigma, like, it's that, there was that creep, the Ninja 250 became the Ninja 300, became the Ninja 400. And now there's, some of those bikes are 450s.
Yeah.
And so there'll have to be a whole new wave of new bikes that come in underneath them.
Right.
Because everything is just growing. And I mean, when you think of a GS, a 1300 or the big multistrada, I mean, I guess part of it goes towards why this mid-size 900, as if that's a mid-size, or BMW calls it the maxi mid or something like that. But little bikes, I mean, the smaller capacity bikes must really be a boon for women coming in, I would think, and slighter riders. I know a lot of riders have said how much they love the little KTM Adventure and other bikes of that size as well.
Yeah, but I mean, one thing to keep in mind too is that just because a bike is small displacement, it doesn't mean it has a low seat. I've ridden plenty of 400cc motorcycles that are still really tall. So you just need to, try them out, try the different seats on them, whatever the displacement is.
Right. You guys don't make seats, do you? Maybe you should make seats.
Actually, in Germany, at the headquarters, they do, yeah, they don't make seats, but they do seat recovering and reshaping seats. So maybe someday we'll implement that here too.
One of the things that's changed in recent years is the sort of lessening of significance of the North American motorcycle market. By North American, I exclude Mexico. It's mostly Canada and the U.S. Because of the huge sort of growth in motorcycling in Asia. And, the U.S., which was once this huge market, is now, it's less than 1% of global sales. And one thing, I just came back from India a while ago, and one thing that was interesting is they sell more motorcycles in India in 2 weeks than they sell in the U.S. in a year.
Yeah.
No, they're not big bikes. They're motorized two-wheelers. Most of them are smaller.
Yeah.
But is the U.S. for your company now? Is the U.S. still an important market?
Yeah, it's a hugely important market. I mean, partly because it's a newish endeavor for SW-Motech, but there's so much potential, and especially since we're a company that covers lots of different segments, there is a lot of potential here. And also we talk a lot in the industry about new bikes and new bike sales and what's going on there, but we have to remember that there are constantly used bikes being sold, and people need gear for the used bikes, or they need to replace parts on all the used bikes. And so we also look at just overall registrations and that level of growth, or what's shifting around out there.
And do you have the current statistics for the U.S. and the number? What is the percentage of female riders? Do you know what that is?
The most recent number that I've heard was 18%. And that was from the Motorcycle Industry Council a couple of years ago. There's speculation that it continues to grow, especially with the younger generations. So I'll be really interested to see how that number shakes out in maybe another 2 or 3 years.
So a fifth of Americans riding are women, which is really striking. And when you actually break that down into how many millions of people that is, it's really massively huge, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, what is the figure in Canada?
I don't know what it is. I mean, typically our numbers sort of parrot the US's. I mean, that's historically. What's interesting about Canada is that all of Canada is essentially California. So for instance, the New Yorker magazine has the same number of subscriptions in Canada as they do in California.
Okay.
And most things we're sort of 1/10 the size of the U.S., which is the population split. And typically, it breaks down into, although there's more motorcycles sold in California than in Canada.
For sure.
Which may be related to climate, do you think?
Well, yes, climate and population.
Do you think that the ADV craze will continue? Do you think there's other segments that are coming up? I know there was a lot of strange things happened during the COVID years. Off-road anything sold like wildfire, and I think a lot of companies have been caught out because they, which is a human sort of foible, is that even though everyone knew it was a spike, everybody thought, well, this is just going to be the way it is from now on. And I know that a lot of companies, for instance, parts distribution companies, who thought they were going to have to lay everybody off and go to business, had their best years ever during COVID.
Yeah.
And then now things are really softening. So in terms of your company, what is and has it been difficult to adapt to the COVID years and post-COVID years? So
we launched in 2020, right as COVID was hitting. So we didn't really have a before for SW-Motech. And we've seen steady growth the whole time. It was definitely a boon for motorcycling during COVID, and there is a little bit of a retraction of that going on now. But we are still seeing, this influx of the new smaller displacement bikes. I just keep hearing so much about riders want smaller bikes, and there was a big ADV rally out here recently, and it was notable the number of skinny tire dirt bikes that were there amid the ADV bikes. So it's going to be interesting to see, I think, where the industry goes in the next couple of years, if the small displacement is going to continue to be such a big trend, or if the small displacement riders of today will be moving on into the bigger bikes, the bigger ADV bikes.
Well, it is kind of a funny thing because, there's that old chestnut that, it's much more fun to wring the neck of something small than it is to, sit on the back of something giant.
Yeah.
And there's this stigma that exists in motorcycling with this obsession where you have to, seemingly move up.
Hmm.
When really, I mean, I've a few years ago we did a big off-road ride and we went to northern Quebec. And everybody that I was with had, really focused KTMs, and I had a KLX 300, I think, Kawasaki. By far the wimpiest bike. But I got everywhere they did about 3 minutes behind them. And at the
Yeah.
end of the day, I felt fine and they were exhausted
Yeah.
from wrangling these things. And so really, I wouldn't, and on the way back, somebody said, "Do you want to trade?" And I was like, "No, thanks." So really, there is this smaller bikes are just, especially off-road, they're just better. At this BMW launch I was mentioning was at, when you're on the highway, you want a 1300. And then all of a sudden, as soon as it turns to dirt, you want a 450. And so
Yeah.
it really, the ADV bike is it's being asked to do things that we want it to fulfill an absurdly broad range of things, which is why you need
Yeah.
5 motorcycles. How many do you have now? You've got your sport bike.
I have 4. I have 2 dirt bikes, the Transalp and the S1000R.
Oh,
So
you've got a real sport bike. Wow.
yeah.
Those things are scary fast.
Yeah.
Now, in terms of skill development, do you still attend schools? I mean, what do you do to keep up on your skill set as a rider?
Yeah. I would say in the last few years I've gotten a little bit lazy about it, although I did do American Super Camp dirt track school last year, and tight obstacle course school the year before that. There's so many options out there, and I feel like everything is cross training for all the different kind of riding that you do. So in the past, I did a lot of like motocross and off-road specific training. Done some of the adventure training with BMW too, which is a lot of fun. But yeah, I'm due again for some training, I think. It's always good to keep your skills fresh.
Well, I sometimes make the analogy between riding and music, and I think if you took the average level of a motorcyclist, and if that the average skill set for a motorcyclist was that of, say, a guitarist, there'd be a lot of really bad music. I think, and I don't exclude myself. I mean, I think we get lazy, and yet the difference is no. People generally don't die from playing the guitar, but you certainly lose your license, you lose your life on a motorcycle because they're,
Yeah.
as my mother would say, they were dangerous. So I think it behooves all of us to work and to buy your crash bars. I think that's where we're going with this, isn't it? So what's next up for you in your career? You keep moving around. Are you going to stay where you are for a while, or what's going on? Do you have any big trips planned or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, I plan to stick around here for a while, and especially with womenridersnow.com, we have a big ladies first tour, on-road tour going on this summer in Spain and Portugal. So that's kind of my big riding plans for the year, is that I did a really fun Death Valley ride a couple months ago, and there were a lot of ADV newbies there, so that was fun. But I don't know. Yeah, what I'm just going to do as much riding as I can, and keep working on Women Riders Now and SW-Motech for the time being.
In closing, a word from our sponsor. eBay Motors is here for the ride. With some elbow grease, fresh installs, and a whole lot of love, you transformed 100,000 miles and a body full of rust into a drive that's all your own. Brake kits, LED headlights, whatever you need, eBay Motors has it. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, it's guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time, or your money back. Plus, at these prices, you're burning rubber and not cash. Keep your ride alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions naturally apply. Thank you for listening to The Lowdown Show.